Today's daf we're going to be learning is Sanhedrin Daf Kufaf. We're going to get started from the bottom of Kuf Hamubet. Today we're going to cover the end of Bil'am and move into Doeg HaEdomi. Again, people on our list of people who don't have a portion in the world to come. Amar Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani Amar Rabbi Yonatan. We're three lines from the bottom of Kuf Hamubet. My dichtiv, we're now going to quote a pasuk from Mishlei. What is this referring to when it says, Ne'emanim pitzei ohev v'ne'atarot nishikot soneh? Better to have wounds from someone you love than kisses from someone who you hate. Tova klala, so here's an example. Tova klala shekilel achiyah shiloni et Yisrael. Better the curse that Achiyah Shiloni said about the Jewish people. Yoter mi bracha shebracham Bil'am rasha. Better than the blessing that Bil'am gave the Jewish people. Okay, so Bil'am gave a blessing, and we learned this yesterday. Even though he gave a blessing, he really wanted to curse the Jews in all sorts of ways, and out from it came blessings on those same issues. But in fact, we ended with that all the curses came true in the end, even though he didn't really say them, right? In the end, they came true. So the blessings turned into curses, except for one of them. And then from there we see, even though we got blessed, it ended up cursing us. And likewise, Achiyah Shiloni, who talks about the impending destruction. I mean, he was in the beginning with Yeravam, with the split, and he said Yeravam's going to be king, and then talked about the destruction that will come later. But that was better. Why is that better? Now, we also learned yesterday that even though God left us, right, God doesn't ever leave us completely. So that's what we're going to say here. Achiyah kilel et Yisrael b'kaneh, shene'emar, v'yikashem et Yisrael kasher yanud hakaneh b'mayim. Okay, that God is going to hit the Jewish people. Okay, this is his prophecy, like a reed. And what is a reed? So, ma kaneh, what's unique about a reed? Omei b'mkom mayim. First of all, it lives in the water, which is always a good thing. That, right, lives with his water. Giz o machlif. It regenerates. Like if you cut it, it'll grow again. Shorashav merubim, it has a lot of roots. And when, let's say, you go to get attacked, afilu kol ruchot sheba'olam ba'ofen oshvopo, ein mezizot oto mimkomo. What happens to a reed? Let's say a huge wind comes. It's going to blow back and forth, but it's not going to actually be uprooted. Ela hu olech v'bayim, right? It sways back and forth. Kevan shedomemu aruchot. As soon as the winds stop blowing, Amad kanebim kamo. It's going to be standing exactly as it was before. That was the attack, right, on the Jews from Achiyah Shiloni. Yes, it's going to be rough. We're going to wave from side to side, but in the end, we're going to be standing. Aval Bil'am rasha bercham be'erez. One of the things that Bil'am said is you're going to be tall and strong like the cedar tree. Ma erez ze'eno mebim komayim. First of all, it doesn't live with his water. It doesn't grow with his water. Shorashav muatin. It doesn't have a lot of roots. Ein gizo machlif. If you cut it, it won't grow again. Afilu kol ruchot sheba'olam ba'ofen oshvopo ein mitzizot otom kamo. Now, on the one hand, the strongest winds can come, or very strong winds can come, and it won't move from its place. It's very solid. However, kevan shenashrabo bruach dromit, but if the south wind comes, which is a very strong wind, miyad or kartova fachto al panav, it'll knock it down, and it'll be completely right. Imagine, sometimes you have those trees that go down. That's the end of it. So velod ella. So therefore, the brachot can just end basically at some point, right? Even the brachot of a soneh, right? He said this like an erez, but an erez has an end life. Velod ella. And by the way, you want to mention one other thing about the reed. Achiyah said that God will attack us with a reed. Lord ella shezachach kaneh litomi menu kulmus. A kaneh, a reed, is actually used for a quill. Lichtov mimenu sefer Torah nevi'im uktuvim. They use it to write sefer Torah nevi'im uktuvim. It's got a certain value to it, better than a cedar tree, which, looks like it's much better, but not. We're continuing now in words of Bil'am. Toward the end of his speeches, he starts to say all sorts of speeches about other nations. So one of the nations he talks about, Vayaret HaKeni, Vayisam Shalom. Remember, we just learned about the Keni. The Keni were the descendants of Yitro. So Amar lo Bil'am li Yitro, Keni, lo yiti imanu ba'ota. He says, I don't understand, Yitro. How'd you end up where you ended up with the Jews? Weren't you there when Paro decided he's going to throw all the Jewish men into the Nile? Weren't you sitting there? Weren't you in the room? Okay. And basically, we're going to see an interesting three people were in the room. And with this, okay, we'll get to it in a minute and we'll try to understand what's going on here. And if you were in the room where it happened, How did you end up sitting with this in the Sanhedrin? It's how did your descendants end up in the Sanhedrin if you were originally part of the whole plot to kill the Jewish people? I don't get it. Now, how do we know he was there? Well, Rabbi Chia says in the name of Rabbi Simai, there were three people there. Ve'eluhen, who was with Paro when he decided to kill the Jews, Bilam, Iyov, Yitro. Now, why are we isolating these three people? Because these are three Gentiles in the Torah who have a lot to do with the Jewish people, right? Or Iyov doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the Jewish people. We don't know Iyov's connection to the Jewish people, but Iyov is a strong character in the Tanakh, right? He has a whole book about him, and he was with God, and we're trying to figure out like who are these three people, and we're going to compare the differences between them. We have Bilam, who's a prophet, right? Obviously, a very prominent, right? All these three people were very prominent people in their right in their environment or in their chevra, right? But we have a difference between the three of them, okay? And they're all three Gentiles that have something to do with us. So what's the difference between them really? And that's what this is trying to get at. So they're assuming that since they're Gentiles, that must have been there with Paro when he was deciding, and let's see what each of their reactions was. Bilam Sheya'atz. Well, Bilam helped give the advice because that's what we know. We're going to see today how Bilam gave the advice to the Midianim of how to kill, or the Moab, right, to Balak, from Moab, how to kill the Jewish people. In the end, it was the Midianite women they brought. That's why I said Midian, but whatever. The point is, he gave advice to people about how to kill the Jews, so he must have been there and he must have advised. And that's why Bilam in the end is killed. And we're going to see today that he was killed in chapter 31 of Bamidbar, when we have this big war against the Midianim after the whole new thing. We have a few chapters that kind of go off topic, and then we go right back to there's this war with the Midianites because of the Midianite women who caused this huge plague in the Jewish people. The Jews ended up worshiping idols with them and engaging in prostitution with them. And 24,000 Jews get killed. And then basically we have this war against the Midianim. And in that war, it says they killed Bil'am with a sword. In the end, they're going to say the sword is Pinchas, and Pinchas killed him. See that later today. So Bil'am gets killed because he helped advise them. Iyov sheshatat, Iyov was just silent. Well, nidon b'yisulim. He suffers because he didn't say anything, right? He was just silent and he sat there and he stayed there. So that was, and now we're, right, this is coming to somewhat explain this, what no one ever understands. How did Iyov have so much suffering, right? Obviously in the book of Iyov, it explains how it was because God wanted to test him, and it was this kind of discussion between the Satan and God, and he was all good. But and then his friends all say, it could be you're so good and you get punished. There's always some connection. And that's really what this Midrash is saying. He obviously did something wrong. What did he do? He was silent when Paro wanted to kill everyone. And the third, Yitro, Shebarach, well, he ran away. And this explains, right, why Zachu b'nei banav l'sheb l'ishkat hagazid. And that's why his children, his descendants, were able to sit in the Sanhedrin many generations later. Because he understood that this was bad. He couldn't change Paro, but he ran away and said, I don't want to be here. Shenemal, as it says, u'mishpachot sofrim yoshvei yabetz. Okay, this we saw already two dapim ago, right? And the mishpachot of the sofrim who were sitting in the Sanhedrin are titaim, shematiim, suchatim. Who are these people? Hema hakinim abaim achmat avi beit rechav. They're the ones who are the Keni family. Uchtiv, who's Keni, b'nei Keni, chotem Moshe, alumi irat marim. Sons of Keni, who came from the family of the father-in-law of Moshe. Here you have it, that they were. Yitro is the Kenim, and the Kenim were in the Sanhedrin. Okay. Vayisam Shalom Yomar. Another thing Bilam says. Oy mi sheyachyeh misumo el. Oy, who will survive in sumo el? What is sumo el? So Rashi explains, K'shemisim HaKadosh Baruch Hu pidyon la'atzmo u'mishalem gumul l'tzadikim la'ati lavo. On the day that God exacts justice on other nations and does good for brings the righteous people to the Olam Haba. Okay, so basically, who is going to live from that? Okay, we're going to try to figure out what this means. Amar Rav Shimon ben Lakish. We're going to have machlok at Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan how to understand this pasuk. Oy mi shemechayeh atzmo b'shem el. The misumo el they understand as mishmo el, someone who makes himself into a god, like some of the kings proclaim themselves gods. They're right miyachyeh. No one is going to survive doing that. If you make yourself into a god, you'll be punished. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, oy la l'umma shetimatzeh b'sha'a shakadosh baruch hu oseh pidyon lebanav. when God comes, the day of Sumoel, when God comes to redeem his children, there's no nation that's going to stand. In other words, don't come near when that's going on, because what will happen to you, you'll get killed. Okay, mi matil ksuto ben lavila leviyah b'sha'ashen nizkakim zeim zeh. It's like when a lion and a lioness get together to mate, right? Stay far away from there because there's a lot of action going on, and you could get killed if you get involved in the middle. And that's what they're saying. Any nation who tries to come in the middle when God is exacting justice in the world is just gonna, you get involved in some fight that's not yours, well, you're gonna get destroyed. And that's what it means. Oy misumoel. This is more the pshat of the sumoel, the way Rashi explains it anyway. The day that God makes his name big, who's going to survive that if you get involved? Don't come in the middle there. Vitziim miyad kitim. Okay, tziyim are fleets of boats from the kitim. Who are the kitim? Amarav, libun aspir. Some versions have it legion aspir, which makes more sense because legion is a legion, and it could be talking about a Roman legion. V'inu Ashur inu Evel. Okay, so what's this Roman legion going to do? They're going to torture Ashur, torture Evel. So why do you have the word inu twice here? The drasha is going to be, it must be the torture of Ashur is different than the torture of Ever. So how do they explain it? So this Roman legion that's going to come, ad Ashur katle miktal, until they get to Assyria, they're going to be killing everybody along the way. Mikam va'elach, they're going to shift gears after that. Mishabde shiabude. They're not going to kill everybody, they're just going to take them as their slaves. Hineni holech la'ami. So now we have kind of after Bil'am finishes the cursing, right, which turned into blessing, he says, now I'm going to my nation. Like, see you later. I'm heading home. And I'm going to now give you advice about what this nation is going to do to you in the future. Now, the famous drasha is, because what happens in the chapter after, right? So after this happens, basically, right, then Bilam has a little more to say. And then the next thing is they get to Shittim, the Jewish people, and they start to liznot benot Midyan. Okay, so let me just read you the pasuk. Vayeshev Yisrael b'Shittim. Sorry, it's benot Moab. Vayachel am liznot benot Moab. Okay, there's also Midianite women there, but it says first they're liznot benot Moab. So now we have a problem. What's the problem? Bilam says, I'm going to give you advice. Now, the famous midrash, which we're going to read today, and I don't know if you'll remember this whole long version of it, but the what everyone remembers really is that Bilam says, listen, I can't curse the Jewish people, but I can give you advice about how to destroy them, and basically says, why don't you get them to engage in prostitution? God will leave them and they'll die. God will punish them. And that's how you get to the Jewish people. You won't be able to curse them from the outside, but you can destroy them from the inside. So the assumption of this pasuk is, I'm going to, because it says I'm going to give you advice. Now, if he was just telling them what this nation is going to do to Moab in the future, then he wouldn't say Iyatzcha. I'm not giving you advice about what they're going to do. I'm just telling you what they're going to do. So he says this must mean that Bilam gave him advice about how to destroy the Jewish people. But if that's the case, it shouldn't say Asher ya'aseh ha'am hazeh la'amcha, what this nation is going to do to you. It should have said Amcha la'amazeh. I'm going to give you advice about what your nation can do to their nation. And that's not what it says. So it should be Amcha la'amazeh mebaile. That's what it should have said in the pasuk. So Amar Rabbi Abba bar Kana ha'adam shemekalel et atzmo v'tolek kilelato ba'acherim. It's like a person who might curse himself, but says it in words that it's as if he's cursing someone else. This we see all the time. Euphemisms in the Gemara, all the time they have it, where they say God's going to bring destruction on those who hate Israel, when he really means, or those who write sinners to Israel, but really means the Jewish people. He just doesn't want to say it in words. Sometimes you don't want to say what you actually mean because you get into trouble for it, or because you don't want it to really, it just doesn't sound right. So here, he didn't really want to get into trouble. Why? He didn't want to say, listen, I can give you advice about how to kill the Jewish people, because then it would make Balak, the king of Moab, feel like, oh, I need advice from you and I don't know, right? It's never good to go to a king and say, I can tell you what you should do. You always want to make the king think it's their own idea, right? You don't want to say, I'm telling you what to do. So that's why he said, I'm telling you what this nation is going to do to you. So that didn't come out sounding like, I'm going to tell you what you should do. But really, he told him what he should do. So Amar Lahem, here's his advice. Elohem shel elu sonei zimahu. So their God hates licentious behavior. Hem mitavim leklei pishan. Another thing about them, they crave linen garments. Okay, it could be because they were in the desert, right, and didn't really have clothes. So like They always are happy to have nice clothes. So here's my advice. I'll give you advice. Make yourself these tents and put prostitutes inside them. Skenami bachut, put an elderly woman outside. Yaldami bifnim, and the young women, the more attractive ones, inside the tent. B'yim karulaim klei pishtan, and they'll sell them linen clothing. Asela, okay, this is a great business model. Aselahem klaim mehar sheleg ad beit yeshimot. So he didn't really go into all the detail yet, but immediately they took his advice. They made these tents where they would sell clothing from Har Sheleg, the snow mountain, which is Har Hermon, from all the way in the north until Beit Yeshimot in the south. So he filled the country with them. Boshibam Zononi per prostitutes, Kenami Bachutz, Eldami Bifnim, the older woman outside, the younger woman inside. When the Jews were eating and drinking and happy and going to the shuk to buy stuff, Omer Eloas Kena, Yatam Mevakesh Klei Pishtan, you looking to buy linen garments. Skena Omer Lo B'Shaveh, so the Skena offers a price. V'Yalda Omer Lo B'Pachot, and the young girl inside says, "Oh, I could give you a better price." Right? There's a good story in our family about someone who had a store, and they owned two stores, one across the street from the other, and they used to, the people would go into one store and they say, "Oh, too expensive." They say, "Oh, there's another store across the street for cheaper." They get all these people to go buy in their other store. So this is exactly the same thing, except here there's more deception involved. Like it's not like a bad thing. It's just a good business practice. So now, or I don't know, but anyway, she says, I can sell it to you for cheaper. Shtein v'shalosh pamim. So now they do this a few times where they go to they come, they're in the show. The older woman offers them the price. Then the younger woman says, I give you a better price. And then they buy from the younger woman. So they've already bought from her a few times. But it seems like each of these times she comes outside her tent and offers the item. After she's already, spoken to him a few times and sold to him a few times, she'd say, Hare'at ki ben bayit. You're like a ben bayit. You come here all the time. Why don't you come into my tent and choose for yourself? She has all this wine inside, Ammonite wine. Now, here's like a parenthetical statement, which is kind of funny. Just so you know, adayin lo ne'esal yain shel goyim. Okay, the whole thing of yain nesach, that you can't drink wine from Gentile, that's later. It wasn't forbidden in those times. Okay, it's ending right in the end. They're going to forbid it. There's actually two reasons. One is because they offered their wine to idol worshippers, and that's yain nesach. Also because there's a concern we're going to come to relations with them, which actually happens in the story. So, but at that point, it wasn't forbidden. Just so you think, like, how are they drinking the wine? Amralo. So she brings them in to buy it, and she says, "Oh, you want a cup of wine?" So sure. Kevan shata, right? Who's going to say no to a cup of wine? Kevan shata ba'arbo. Once he drinks it, right? He's in this tent with this beautiful woman, and he can't handle his evil inclination anymore. It's burning inside of him. Amar la hishameli. So he says, "Sleep with me." Hutzia yirata mitoch cheka. Now, before she agrees to sleep with him, when she knows she has him in her pocket, so no pun intended, she takes out of her pocket one of her, right, an aliyah, an idol. Remember, we had this word yirah before. She pulls out the idol from her bosom. Amra lo, right, not pocket, but bosom. Amra lo avod lizeh. She says, first, if you want to sleep with me, you have to worship this. Amarla. Okay, this really good person, I don't know, but he's about to sleep with this Gentile woman, but all of a sudden he says, "Oh, that I can't do. Hello, Yudiani, I'm a Jew. I can't worship an idol." What do you care? All we're asking to you is to defecate in front of the idol. Now remember, or that was what they did. They defecate. That was the way of worshiping it. Now here comes this parenthetical statement, which actually in my Gemara is in square brackets, which means actually it was taken out, but it really should be in. He doesn't know that that's the way you're supposed to worship Baal Peor, which raises the question because it's not really avodah zarah, right? Remember, we learned if you don't really intend it to be, but obviously this was considered avodah zarah here. Velod ella, not only that, but and by the way, when she's already got him in, she says, and you have to deny Moshe is your leader. Shenemal. Because of their love for these women, right? They basically ended up worshiping idols. Vayeshev Yisrael b'Shittim. This is the beginning pasuk. They were sitting in Shittim. Now we're going to darshan the word Shittim. Why Shittim? So Rabbi Eliezer Omer Shittim Shema. He says that was just the place. Okay, don't make too much of it. Rabbi Yeshua Omer Shenitzas Kubi Divrei Shtut, because they were involved in stupid things, right? They were ended up sleeping with these women. Vatikrena la'am lizivchei Elohehen. Again, psukim from there. We're going to darshan. Vatikrena la'am lizivchei Elohehen. Now, what's this tikrena? Tikrena often means like what's the use of this word? So tikrena often means like it happened upon. So they're going to say, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, arumot pagu bahen. When they happened upon them while they were naked. In other words, when they saw these women, the women were already naked, and that's what attracted them. Rabbi Yoshua Omer, shenasu kulam ba'alei karyan. They all had seminal emissions, and that's karena, vatikrena, from keri, same root. Man lashon rifidim. Now they jump to a different pasuk, and because once we darshan Shittim, and we saw Rabbi Eliezer said don't darshan it, and Rabbi Yeshua had a drasha, we're now going to go to the pasuk vayavo Amalek, totally different section. When Amalek comes and attacks the Jewish people, it says it was rifidim. Okay, so now what rifidim? Why rifidim? Rabbi Eliezer Omer rifidim shema. Again, Rabbi Eliezer says that's just its name. Rabbi Yeshua Omer sheripu atzmam midivrei Torah. They weaken themselves from Torah, and that's what caused Amalek to come. They're using this pasuk to say that fathers didn't help the sons because they were weakened. Okay, rifyon is the lashon of weak, and therefore rifidim was weak, and weak from what? Must be weakened from Torah. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, kol makom shenemar vayeshev, so that was our pasuk. Vayeshev Yisrael b'Shittim, and then immediately what happens? Then they start to do znut with the daughters of Moab. So anytime it says vayeshev, eno ela lashon tzal. This means it's a foreshadowing that something's going to happen. And now we're going to have a whole bunch of psukim. As soon as it says Vayeshev, something bad happens. It's Vayeshev. So here's our pasuk. Shenemar Vayeshev Yisrael b'Shittim Vayachel ha'am liznot b'not Moab. Okay, and they immediately start doing snoof. Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz Megurei Aviv be'eretz Canaan, and Yaakov was sitting in the land of his fathers in Eretz Canaan. Vayavei Yosef et dibatam ra'a al avihem, and then Yosef starts talking bad about his brothers, and then that leads to the whole being thrown in the pit, getting down to Egypt, etc., etc. V'ne'emal, vayeshev Yisrael be'eretz Goshen, vayikrevu yemei Yisrael lamut. Okay, as soon as it says the Jews settled in Goshen, then it says, and then Yaakov was getting close to dying. Vayeshev Yudah Yisrael labetach ish tachat gafnov tachat teinato. This is at Shlomo Melech's time, right? Everybody was sitting under their famous pasuk, right? Everyone under their vine and under their fig tree. Everything's good. Vayakam Hashem Satan l'Shlomo et hadad ha'amonim mizera hamelech hu be'edom, and then God brings the Satan to Shlomo, basically brings this other nation to fight against him. Okay, this is a number of prakim later, but the ish tachat gafnot and teinato is the intro to this, or it's in the beginning of this whole section that talks about Shlomo's wealth, and then right after that, really, it starts talking about that the bad came. Okay, now we're getting back to the war with the Midyanim, where they end up killing Bil'am. So first it says the kings of Midyan, they killed al Chalalehem, Bil'am ben Be'or hargu b'charev, and Bil'am they killed by the sword. Bil'am, my Hatam, what's he doing there? Okay, here's a good question. Remember Bil'am said, I'm going to go home, and let me just give you some advice about what to do. Sounds like Bil'am went home. This wasn't his nation. What was he doing in the Midianite war? So, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Shalach li tos schar 24,000 shepil miYisrael. He gave them advice. The advice was excellent. The Jews got 24,000 Jews were killed. He came back to get paid. He said, I gave you great advice. Now pay up. So that's what he was doing there. Amar Mar Zutra, Bar Tuvia, Amar Rav, Hainu de Amrei Nashi. This is what people say. Again, a quip people say. Usually Rav Papa's the one who brings them. This time it's Mar Zutra in the name of Rav. Gam la'azla lemibe karneh, udne dehavile gaziza mine. The camel goes to get a horn. Okay, now a horn is not really appropriate for a camel, as was this money that Bil'am was asking for wasn't really appropriate for him. But so the camel goes to get horns, and they cut off his ear. Okay, not only did not get his horns, but they cut off his ear. He came to get paid. Not only did not get paid, but he got killed. Bil'am ben Be'or kosem. Okay, here's a pasuk from Yoshua. It's talking about Bil'am, and it calls him a kosem. Kosem, a magician, a sorcerer, a diviner. Kosem, navi. What do you mean? He was a navi. He was a prophet. He wasn't a magician. Rabbi Yochanan, b'tchila navi u'levasaf kosein. Originally, he was a prophet. Later, after this whole story, he wasn't going to be a prophet anymore. So he became, right, like a step down, and he became a kosein. Amar Rav Papa, here comes Rav Papa with, this is what people say. Hainu da'amrei nashe, misgane v'shalite havai, izayin legavrei nagare. This woman came from, or what she's saying about herself, I was descended from princes and officers, and now, she was licentious with carpenters, like not important people. Okay, we're going to talk now about, Rashi has two different interpretations for Nagare, but we'll leave it at that. Turning now to Amabet. Hargu b'nei Israel b'cherev el chalalehem. So now what do we learn about this chalalehem, like in plural? They say Amarav, shekimu bo arba mitot. Skilas refahereg b'chenek. We're finally getting some connection between our chapter or the previous chapters. When the Jews killed the people there, they kill them in all the different manners of the arba mitot beitin, as if they're getting punished for, right? Skilas refahereg b'chenek. They're getting punished for their actions. Amalehu mina Rabbi Chanina. Heretic said to Rabbi Chanina, Mishmialach Bilam bar Kamahavid. Do you know how old Bilam was when he was killed? Amalei michtav lo ktiv. So Rabbi Chanina said, look, it doesn't say so, but elami dechtiv, but I can derive it from the following pasuk. Anshe damim uruma lo yachzu yemehem, and we've learned this before, right? That people who have blood on their hands and do evil deeds don't reach half their days. Now remember, a lifespan in those days was 70 years. They don't reach half their days, they're going to die before age 35. So Bartlatin Shnin or Bartlatin Utlat Shnin, he was either 33 or Bartlatin Va'arba, or he said 34. Amalei Shapir Kamarta. So I guess the heretic was testing him, because the heretic then says, good answer. You answered correctly. How do I know? Lididi Chadi Pinkase de Bilam. I found the notebook of Bilam, or notes about Bilam, and it said there, Bartlatin utlachnim bilam chagira kakatil yate Pinchas lista'a. Here comes the Pinchas killed him. So he was in the Pinchas of, obviously it wasn't the Pinchas that Bilam himself wrote, but somebody wrote about Bilam. I found it written that Bilam was killed when Bilam the Chager, remember he had an issue with one of his legs. He was lame, and he was killed when he was 33 by Pinchas lista'a. Okay, lista'a. The current translation is highwayman or something. I don't know why they call Pinchas that, but it seems to be the Pinchas. Also because he killed him with a sword, and he killed Zimri and Cosby with a sword. So perhaps that's why they connect that Pinchas was the one who killed him. I was thinking it's like those movies, in the end, the bad guy always gets killed by the main character of the movie, So Pinchas was the main character there. It must be he was the one who killed him, right? It's like pathetic to have the big terrible villain get killed by some lowly random person. So it could be that's why they attribute it to Pinchas. Amar le Mar Bered Ravina Libere. So Mar Bered Ravina says to some Bekulu lo tafish lemidrash. Don't start darshaning all these people and how many bad things they did, and don't keep expanding expounding the psukim and explaining all the bad things people did. Livar mi Bilam Arasha, except for Bilam. Okay, we saw this before, that Bilam's the worst of all of them, because there were some opinions, right? The Jorshei Shumot, who said all of them get Olam Haba, just not Bilam, right? He was clearly worse. Bilam's the only one you could really continue to darshan. And I think part of the issue is Lashon Hara, like how many bad things can you say about people? It's not nice. But Bilam, you can do as much as you want. However much you want, keep saying bad things about him. Okay. And that was the last line we get about Bilam. It's actually funny. Say whatever you want, and then end of story, we're finished. But we've already said a lot about him. Now we're moving on to the next character, Doeg HaEdomi. So again, the story is David is running away from Shaul. He hides in Novi Irakonim, but he tells them a fake story about why he's there, not telling them he's hiding from Shaul. Then he asks them for food. They give him food, and they shelter him. And Doeg HaEdomi tells on him to Shaul. And then Shaul says, Doeg, you go out and kill all the people in the city. They kill everyone except for one. Doeg does it, right? We had a debate a long time ago. Could Doeg have said no? Was he wrong for not fighting back against Shaul and carrying out his words without saying anything? And that seems to be also what's the problem here, that he didn't complain, he didn't say no, and he just did his actions and killed basically almost the whole city. So now we're going to learn about Doeg. And the main theme for today is Doeg was a real Talmid Chacham. He learned a lot of Torah. What was wrong with his Torah? In other words, if you're a Torah scholar, like, then he should have been a good person. Like, what was missing here? What was wrong? So, and really, it's going to say a lot about learning Torah. That seems to be the agenda of the sugya about how to learn Torah, what yes to do, what not to do. But first, we're going to start with his name, as we did with all of them, and darshan his name. But here we're going to say that Ktiv Doeg, Uktiv Doyeg. Okay, in one place it's called Doeg, and another is called Doyeg. So what's going on here? Amar Rabbi Yochanan, B'tchila Yosef Kadosh Baruch Hu. Originally, God was sitting V'Doeg. Shema Yitzei Zev L'Tabut Ra. He saw this big Talmid Chacham, Torah scholar, and he said, I'm worried about him. Doeg means worried. God was worried maybe he'll leave the path, which is exactly what happens. But when he did leave, then he started saying, oy vavoy, that this person left. And that's doyeg with the vav yud is like oy. So it became, oh, I'm so upset that he left he left the fold, or however you call it. Okay, siman. Here we have a siman for 5 drashot of Rabbi Yitzchak, but if you count them properly, you're going to see there's actually 6 and one is missing from the siman. Don't have an explanation. But Gibor, Rashat, Tzaddik, Chayil, v'Sofer. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. My dichtiv matitalel bera'ah hagibor. Okay, the first thing you have to know is this is a pasuk from Tehillim Nun Bet. Why is that important? One of the things, and it's a good time to discuss right now, even though we don't have a lot of time, but always important to drop these things in, which is a lot of the things we've been seeing. I don't know if you've had the time to appreciate. We go so fast and there's so much information here. But they're doing an amazing job, these rabbis, at taking psukim from all different places and connecting them to actions that happen, right? And figuring out, oh, this pasuk is talking about that person. Now, probably you say, what did that pasuk have to do with that person? On the other hand, it's an amazing way they have. It's like a talent of, first of all, knowing all the psukim to be able to do this, and then take them and say, oh, look, this must be describing this person, and then connecting it. In this case, we're taking Tehillim Nun Bet, although some of the psukim are not from Tehillim Nun Bet, but the ones are from Tehillim Nun Bet. You look inside, Tehillim Nun Bet starts off, Lamnesach maskil David, bivo doeg ha'edomi v'yaged l'Shaul v'yormelo ba David obed Achimelech. Okay, this is a Tehillim which is introduced by saying this all happened when Doeg went and told Shaul, and then we have basically the wording of the Tehillim, and that's going to be relating to the story. So it actually directly relates. It's not like they're taking something from afar and connecting it to here. So here goes. The first drasha is on the pasuk Matitalel bera'ah hagibor chesed el kol hayom. So let's explain this the way the Gemara explains it. Amar lo kadosh baruch hu lidoeg lo gibor b'torata. Okay, matitalal bera'ah. Why are you saying bad things? Why are you saying lashon hara about David? Aren't you a gibor in Torah? Aren't you a very strong Torah learner? Okay, and that's the words matitalel bera'ah. Why are you saying bad things? Hagibor, you're so strong in your Torah. How are you saying lashon hara? Lo chesed el natoya lecha kol hayom. That's the chesed el kol hayom. Don't you have the chesed of God on you all day? So how can you possibly be doing this? V'amar Rabbi Yitzchak. Next rasha. This is a pasuk actually from Tehillim Nun, so it's not where Doeg is mentioned, but we're going to connect it. L'rasha amar Elohim ma lecha lesaper chukai. God said to the evil person, "Why are you learning my statutes?" So this is obvious. Amar lo kadosh baruch hu Doeg rasha. How are you teaching my statutes and learning them? When you get to the part about murderers, which you are, and to the part about not saying bad things about other people, how can you possibly teach these things or learn these things, right? How can you learn something that's so, right, and then do the exact opposite? Batisa, the continuation of that pasuk is Batisa briti ale picha. Amar Rabbi Ami, Ein Torato shel Doeg ela misafav v'lachutz. Now we're going to start learning what was wrong with his Torah. It was just Batisa briti ale picha. It's on your mouth, which means it's kind of on your mouth, but not inside. Your Torah is like a meaningless Torah. You're paying lip service, like we say. That's what you're doing, but you don't really mean it. It's not on the inside. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, another drasha. This is back to the Tehillim Nun Bet, where it's talking about Doeg, and it says, people will see you and will be fearful of you. They will see you and they will laugh. Now, those are two opposite things. In the beginning, they feared you. In the end, they laughed at you. Amar Rabbi, right? Because in the beginning, he was a real Torah scholar. In the end, they realized it was full of nothing, and then they laughed at him. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, you absorb strength and you will spit it out. Mi bitno yorishenu el. From your from your insides, from your stomach, God will make you forget it. Okay? Or God will take it out of you. So now we're going to see. Amar David lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. David said before God, Ribono Shalom. Now we're going to see here that this pasuk is a conversation between David and God. David said, Yamut Doeg. Doeg should die for what he did. Amar lo chayu balav yakienu. He swallowed a lot of Torah. And until he spits it out, I can't kill him. He's got too much Torah in him. So I can't kill him right now. Amar lefanav. So David said to him, Mi bitno yorishenu el. You should take it out. In other words, you can make him forget his Torah right now and kill him. It's in your power. So do it. Right? Because the problem in this pasuk is, it sounds like the person's going to spit it out. And the next part sounds like God is going to make it forgotten. So basically, it's a conversation between David and God. V'amar Rabbi Yitzchak, my dechtiv. I'm going to read the whole pasuk. This is also in Tehillim Nun Bet. It says, "Gam el yitatzcha lenetzach, yachtecha v'yisichacha me'oel v'shershcha me'eretz chaim sela." This is all these things God's going to do. Okay, God's going to yitotz lenetzach. God's going to destroy you forever. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, nete doeg la'alma da'ate. Okay, before this is David's response to God. This is going to be one of these psukim that we're going to have all these words missing that God says, and then David is the response of David is in the pasuk. We should bring Doeg to Olam Haba. He got his punishment in this world, let him die in the next. Let him have his reward in the next world. Amar lefanav, gam el yitatzcha lenetzach. No, you should cut him off forever. Okay, also Olam Haba. My dechtiv yachtecha yisachacha me'oel v'shershecha me'eretz chaim sela. So what's the next part of that pasuk? Yachtecha, right? It should be cut and yisachacha, like taken away from the tent. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu. So God says, fine, he won't be in the world to come, but at least you see here the desire of God. We've seen this a lot in this chapter to accept people even if they've sinned. At least, look, he was a Torah scholar. At least people should mention his name and say, I learned from Doeg HaEdomi. Then David responds, he should be cut and taken out completely from the tent. What is tent? A tent of Torah. God tries one more. You should have at least sons that are Talmidei Chachamim. Right? You should take out the roots from the world of life. Basically, don't make his children Torah scholars. And it seems like David wins. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. Now we're taking a totally different pasuk. My dechtiv ayeh sofer. Okay, this is a pasuk in Yeshayahu. Ayeh sofer. Where's the sofer? Ayeh shokel. Where's the measurer? The one who weighs things. Ayeh sofer tamigdalim. Where's the one who counts the towers? Okay, what is this? Ayeh sofer. Where is the one who counted kol otiyot shebetorah, all the letters in the Torah? Ayeh shokel. They're going to say that this is talking about Doeg. Like, what happened to this person who was such a Torah scholar? Right. This seems to be the theme here. Such a Torah scholar. What's wrong? So again, this is taking a pasuk from somewhere else entirely and just attributing it to Doeg. Where is the shokel? What's shokel? Shokel kol kalim chamurim shebetorah. He checks all the kavachomers. Kavachomers are always tricky. You could flip the logic other ways. So we weigh them and measure them and figured out which ones are good, which ones are not. Ayeh sofer tamigdalim. Shaya sofer shlosh halachot psukot b'migdal porech ba'avir. He would learn 300 halachot, exaggeration, obviously, about like a, what do you call it? An aron, a migdal, like a tower or like a box that's floating in the air. Okay, what this is, good question. The Mefarshim have a lot of different opinions. Some people say this time about, and we've seen this sugyot before in Tum and Tara, about what if you're carrying something in Gentile territory where all the land is tameh, according to rabbinic law, but it never touches the ground, and then maybe, and it's in a box, so maybe a sealed box, so maybe it's not a problem. Okay, so he darshaned a lot of halachot about this esoteric halacha in Tumah V'Tara. So it shows, right, what happened to him. Amar Rav, I'm not sure who this is actually, but Arba me'abai ba'u doeg v'achitofa b'migdal porech ba'avil v'lo ifshatu lu chad. Doeg, and now we're putting him with Achitophel, who also doesn't have Chelik L'Olam Haba. He's the next one on our list. They were both such Torah scholars that they asked 400 questions that no one even had an answer to. That shows their greatness, okay? In about this Bigdala Porech Ba'avir. I'm a Rav. Vivute Lemivabaya, what you're trying to say, it's a great thing to ask questions. That means you're so smart. And the more you learn, like, that's all great. But I'm going to show you it's not all about learning Torah and how much Torah you know and how strong a question you can ask. Because Bishnei de Rav Yehuda kulu taniyu b'nizikin. In the time of Rav Yehuda, all they learned was nizikin. Okay, they didn't learn anything else. Okay, they certainly didn't get to Tarot. The Anan kamanina tuva beuktzin, and we now, Rava says, in our time, we learn uktzin really well. Now, uktzin is the very last Masechet of Shas, so partly could be saying we learn everything, we even get to uktzin, which most people don't get to. Or maybe he's saying we learn all these esoteric things that nobody else learns, and we really know a lot. Now, we know a lot more than they did in the time of Rav Yehuda. V'chiyavamata Rav Yehuda, when he would get to this halacha, this Mishnah in Uktzin, which isn't actually a Mishnah in Uktzin, it's in Tarot, but the second version is going to be from Uktzin. Isha koveshet yerek b'kdeira. It actually has to do with uktzin. What's uktzin? It's the stem. So we have a fruit or a vegetable with a stem. Now, if the fruit is impure, so is the stem because you use it as a yad. Okay, it's like it holds it. And the reverse, if the oketz, right, the stem becomes impure, like the leaves near it, we're going to get to leaves when it comes to right. If people hold the fruit by the leaves or by the stem, and that becomes impure, then the fruit is also impure as well. So, but if a woman takes a vegetable and pickles it, then the stem is no longer, right, it wilts and you can't use it to hold it anymore, and therefore it's all pure. Okay, so if one part gets impure, the other part doesn't. Or Amrila, some people say it was actually a Mishnah Uktzin, which is a Tim Shekavshan B'Tarfehan Toling. If you again, you're pickling these olives in with their leaves. So again, once they're pickled, one is not going to affect the other in terms of Tum and Tara. And okay, when Rav Yehuda would get to that, Amar Vayoter Rav Shmuel Kachazina Hachin. I don't know a lot about this. This is where Rav Shmuel asked a lot of questions. It's not so clear to us. We have 13 Batei Midrash that are Darshni Hilchot Uktzin. Like we know way more than they did. And yet, we're going to see the knowledge isn't everything. Because Rabbi Yehuda Shalaf Masane V'Ati Mitra, he would take off his shoe and the rain would come. Right? Like he would pray to God easily, and the rain would come. And Anan Tzvachim V'Leicha de Mishkan Ba. We're screaming out to God and God is not listening to us. To which he concludes, Ela Kadosh Baruch Hu Libabai. God just wants heart. It's not all about learning Torah. It's certainly about learning Torah without feeling it in your heart. That's what's important. That God sees to your heart. Amarav Masharsha. They didn't understand what they were learning. To which the Gemara says, Marzutra says, what are you talking about? Didn't we just say, Man how can you possibly say they didn't understand anything? We just said they were big Talmidei Chachamim. Their conclusions were never right. They never got to the right conclusions because halacha the secrets of God in terms of how to paskin, how to, right? That's all God gives only to those who fear him. So therefore, they were always wrong. In other words, they had a lot to say and they're very smart, but they always paskin the wrong way. Again, it's interesting. There's like assuming there's a right and a wrong way, right? And they never got to the truth. I'm a Rabbi Ami, which relates to like our Homosechet about the Sanhedrin and trying to judge properly. We don't really know what the truth is. It also connects to this whole thing about what God keeps secret in terms of our perek, about all the secret about when Tchiyat, right, when Yemei Mashiach is and all that. I'm a Rabbi Ami. Lo meto eg ad shechach talmudo. He didn't die until he forgot all his Torah. This is what we saw before, that in order for God to kill him, he had to forget all his Torah. Shenemar hu yamut be'ein musal b'lo v'ivalto yishkeh. Okay, a person will die without musar and with all of his full of foolishness, he will make mistakes. And the point being that unless there's a pasuk in Mishlei, obviously not about doeg, but the point is it relates to him that you can only die without musar. So if he had Torah, he must have forgotten it before he died. Rav Amar Nitztarea. He says he was actually got leprosy. Shenemar Hitzamta kol hazonem mimeka. Anyone who veers from you, because that's really what he did. He veered, will be hitzamata. So what's hitzamata? Tivhatam litzmitut. It says somewhere else tzmitut. And mitargaminan lechalutin. The targum of tzmitut, which comes from hitzamata, is from tzmitut, is chalutin. Utnan ein be muskar muchlat ela priya prima. The difference between a mitzora who's muskar and a tzora who's muchlat. Muchlat is it was determined for sure, as opposed to he was just quarantined. Is priyo prima, that you have to tear your clothes and grow your hair. But the point is that that Smitut is chalut, and chalut has to do with mitzora, with leprosy. And therefore, hit samtat must be a reference to the fact that he got leprosy. Okay, Simam for this last part, Shlosha ra'u v'chatzu v'karu. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Shlosha malachei chabalat nizamnu lo ledoeg. There were three people who basically killed him, three angels. Echad sheshikach talmudo, one made him forget his Torah, that, see, the pasuk with David came true, that he begged God to do that. Echad shesaraf nishmato, one who burned his soul. Ve'echad shebizer afro bebatei knesiot u'bebatei midrash shad. One spread his ashes into the Beit Knesset and the Beit Midrash, which we talked about a lot before. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Good question. The Mefarshim were divided on it. Some people say he got to end up living in the Beit Midrash. Some people say no, it was like he got trampled by people all the time in the most popular places, and it was like people stepping on his the dust from his body. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Doeg v'Achitophel lo ra'u ze et ze. Okay, they didn't live in the same time, even though Doeg b'mei Shaul v'Achitophel b'mei David, right? They were very similar in time period, but they didn't ever see each other. The idea being here that if they had been together, they could have connived evil against David because they both went against King David, but they weren't at the same time. So if they had been together, maybe they could have overpowered him. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Doeg v'Achitophel lo chatzu yimehem. Neither got, now we're going to see why they never saw each other if they lived at similar times. Well, it's because neither reached half their lifespan. Tanya Namihachi, bright to the support. Again, we saw this pasuk before. People with blood in their hands don't get to half their lives. Doeg lived 34 years, and Achitophel lived 33. First, David, remember, Achitophel was his key advisor. So first he called him my Rav. Then he said colleague, and then he said, I'm your teacher. How do we see this? We're going to finish up with this. Again, a parak from Tehillim, King David talking. You're my alufi umiyudai. You're someone who's superior to me. Again, it's not clear he's talking about Achitophel there, but they're taking that pasuk and attributing it. Together we will do important things. Together meaning same level. This really sounds like it could be talking about Achitophel. It's man of peace that I trusted. He ate my food, meaning I taught him Torah. He ate my Torah, and then he turned his back on me. That really describes Achitophel, even though it's not necessarily clear that's what he's talking about there. But easily you can attribute that pasuk in Tehillim to Achitophel, and there you see he went down in David's eyes over time. So we basically dealt with, I'll do a very quick summary of Bilam. Again, darshaning a bunch of things he said, showing, words of foreshadowing. By Yeshev, we saw was a word of foreshadowing. We learned about Bilam's death, and then we got to Doeg and basically struggling with, if he was such a Torah scholar, how did he become so bad? How did he do that? And how did God react to that and deal with it? And basically a lot about how to learn Torah and how not to learn Torah. With that, we finish for today. Have a great day, everyone.